Welcome to the cryptozoology show, and this is part 4 of the Lochness monster with some more European sort of bodies of water here with lake and river monsters. And somebody had mentioned they were kind of wanting me. They didn't understand why in the first one I Loch Ness I put in more of the fish species and stuff. So I said, okay, well, if that's what you want. I didn't know if it depends, right? And I mean, it's a lot of extra work for me to chuck in all these things. But and the other one there wasn't as much because they were all similar, like eel, pike, seals, sort of things like that, right? But anyways, in this one here, we're going to be covering more of these sort of definitely fish monsters, a lot of them, and some unknown sort of strange ones that may be something else to them, and things like that. And we're going to cover some pretty lakes that have had hundreds of years history that I'm sure most of you have never heard of. But even if you have, that's great. Then you're well researched, and that's fantastic. Nothing wrong with that. But you'll certainly know about them now, anyways. And we'll continue on with some of these ones here. And these are more variety of fish ones and things like that. And showing you that there's a lot of explanations to these things and that there is truth to them, and you'll see this. So anyways, stay tuned. And there was a couple of ones here I'll mention from Ireland, and different ones that I should have put in another show, but they sort of more fit it with this sort of thing, and so I'll chuck them in as well. And I'll continue on with other ones here. Will there be more of the lake monster type, and then some are fish and lake monster or whatever, right? So it's a sort of a variety of these things, but it gives you an idea of the sort of huge amount of different variations of these, and that these people aren't exaggerating all the time, and it's certainly not a log every time. So anyways, we'll continue on, and we'll start going through these here. Now, we heard this lake monsters exist of many sorts. This one here, I haven't been able to identify the name of the lake, but it's in the Ukraine, and there's an interesting small film and sort of some photos of this creature. And apparently it's like about 15 feet long, and there's a portion of it you can see up on the top. And it will go and attacks fish and people, right? It's interesting. I'll give you an update more on this lake when I can find more about it, but it's an interesting one. At least there's a little bit of evidence for it that doesn't look to me like a regular wave or any of that sort of stuff, so there might actually be something to it. And but we'll cover some of these as we're going along, as sort of thing. And it's very interesting, but a lot of them are definitely giant fish, and you'll see this, that there's a lot of things that are causing these, right? Let's look next here at different monsters as well, giant fish species across Europe. Here a fish dream catch since a child, the mighty Hushotamen. Look at the size of these monsters, man. Absolutely stunning fish. I mean, absolutely. I mean, this is the king of all salmonoids, man. I mean, this guy, mind you, there is, I cover this in the cryptozoological book about a couple of people I interviewed from Alaska and stuff that claim they bred across like 8-9 foot long sort of these giant sort of monster salmon that even the natives mention, and there's even fossilized records matching a species that would sort of been around this sort of size, right? A real sort of monster, and they got this gigantic pipes on them and everything else, and just absolutely a pretty scary looking sort of salmonoid, right? So, but there is stories of these what ones in there that are reaching this sort of size, but authenticated here, I mean, these dudes have reached like over 80 inches, and one was recorded at 83 inches and 283 pounds. Can you imagine? Like, I landed as a 45-pound Chinook salmon in the Black River in New York on 4-pound line with a small crankbait. And this fish jumped even over some people's boats. How I kept this thing on, but I'm a master at playing gigantic, huge fish on light line, and I was able to do this. And it was absolutely one of the best sort of scraps I've ever had. I mean, it was just the jumps that this thing did and everything. I kept it wouldn't this was a fresh run fish, and I saw some big shadow in this pool, and I just started drifting it in front of him, and I was experimenting with light line and crankbaits and other little jigs and stuff, because I would catch huge rainbow trout and all kinds of stuff since the later 60s, and whitefish and all kinds of species using tiny crappie jigs. I experimented them even in Florida on a bonefish and all kinds of stuff, and I'm definitely the first person to sort of ever do such a thing. There's no mentions in any sort of books you can find of any of that sort of thing until way like massive decades later. And so I was already sort of really well into this, and I would experiment. I even experimented on paddlefish and hooked one in the Missouri River with this reverend guy. And I was scrapping with it, and I experimented on crappie jigs because I thought they were zooplankton feeders. They might actually inhale such a thing. So I made little rows of them, like 3 or 4 in a row, and tie them up the line and just skirted in the current, right? And I experimented with that. So many species, like Laotian cutthroat trout when I was down there, and different ones will hit these sort of crappie jigs, and I cover that in my books and stuff like that, how to set them up and different things and the kinds of baits that will work and all that sort of stuff. So, but I mean, you have to, though, change the hooks that they typically sell on these. When I was a little kid, I bought this whole box of them, and every time the bigger fish, they would straighten them out eventually after a long fight. So what I started doing is getting these really strong English hooks, and I just put a tiny little BB shot on it and sort of wrap thread around it to get it to the size of a crappie jig. Then I would tie like either bucktails or early plastics and stuff and put them on that and use that, right? And I've used these on successfully won lake trout contests even using this kind of method, and nobody else in the lake brought even in fish. Yet I'd catch like a dozen in a day, and which is more than what all the locals see in the entire month of fishing at every morning and evening with their typical gang trolls, right? So there's a lot of techniques I'll cover in the books and stuff like that that you wouldn't find in other sort of stuff, but these sort of things. But now there is some people I've seen doing similar like sort of things using small little sort of baits and different stuff like that. Giants will hit small baits as well, and sort of thing like that, but this huge show caiman is just, I mean, it's such a spectacular fish. I would kill to wrestle 100 grizzly bears to hook into one of these dudes. Right. Now here this a relative of his, a Yusho, they don't get as big, but I mean, they're pretty huge too. And you can see that, and absolutely the Danube salmon, they call it, through the Volga, Murriana, Caspian, and several other areas that this Yusho caiman can be found. And absolutely, what a spectacular fish. So even though that's a big one for today, could you imagine 83 inches, man? Wow. Like, I mean, absolutely extraordinary. Can you imagine hooking that on a fly, man? That'd be the scrap of the century, man. Like, I mean, absolutely awesome, man. So, but anyways, a wonderful sort of interesting sort of fish species, and I certainly would love nothing more in this planet to go there and hook into one of them, for sure. So here, Lake Rabisha, Bulgaria, largest inland lake in Bulgaria. There's this giant stories of this giant bull monster that sometimes people be standing along the shore, and this bull-like creature will come flying out of the water and scare them or bump into their boat or stuff like that. Few old legends of that, but also legends of giant sort of catfish tails, right? And that sort of thing, reported to have attacked swimmers to people's pets, and thought to be at least about a dozen of these giant monster catfish that live in the lake. Zander. Now, I love this fish, man. These are like monster. Like, I've caught in walleyes and released walleyes up to 35 inches and things like that, and a lot in the 32 to 33 inch sort of range, and a few, 134 and a half in Quebec and a 33 and a half in Quebec, and ones like that. Those, once they get a certain length, then they become really sort of start getting lesser and lesser, and they don't typically get as fat like that. Although one I caught in a lake in Quebec, we did have a scale with us, but I mean, this fish was a monster. And one weekend I was with this lady. She caught one, a 33 and a half inch one, and then I ended up catching this 34 and a half inch one, sort of a monster out of the same sort of lake. And I mean, these fish were titanic in girth, titanic and extremely heavy. And I mean, just monsters, monsters. And this was all just on one weekend. And most of the locals don't even know there's walleyes in the lake and stuff like that. And this is a small lake. And yet it produces giants like that. But boy, you got to work hard for them. And I mean, really work hard. Even 10 Al Linders and 10 Ron Linders and a few of myself and a whole gang of host of other characters that have won all kinds of walleye tournaments too, and things like that. Nobody could sort of, like, no matter what, you could fish around the clock there. There just isn't many of them, eh? Like, there's only one giant, the walleyes, only one small one has ever been caught out of the lake. I saw one that was about 3 pounds, and that's it. So you don't even see like young fry of these things, or nothing, like none of the young smaller ones, and none of the locations you would think you would find them, like at rivers pouring into a deep holes, and they'd spawn in there up in the spring, up in the gravel and all that kind of stuff. You don't see any, just the odd trout and stuff like that, right? So there's very, very few in the lake. But the point is that there is, even in our waters, some pretty huge ones. But these Zanders can get even way bigger, and some have been recorded up to about 45 pounds, eh? So real monsters, absolutely a fascinating sort of a fish. Look at the girth on these dudes, man. See, in Europe, they have all these kinds of larger minnow species. Our problem with our North American sort of fish is that after a certain point, they run out of a prey that's easy for them to get, that's fattening and oily, where they're not exerting more energy. It's like, okay, I'll put it this way. If you could stand and there's a pizza parlor right there, and all you got to do is reach your arm in and grab the pizza, and now you eat, you're going to keep getting bigger and fatter than the guy that has to run 5 miles to go get the pizza, even though he's eating the same amount of pizza as you, and then he's got to go jog back. He's going to burn more of that stuff. And this is what you want. You want fish where they don't have to do anything, and there's all kinds of food for them, and all they got to do is just barely breathe or toot, and one's in their jaws, right? This sort of thing. And that's the kind of fish that you would want. Lakes like that. And also in Europe, they feed these lakes unfairly. And a lot of fish get way bigger because even the brim and the different species of large minnows here that they add that we don't, there's brim here, but that's sunfish. It's not the same kind of one. But the thing is that over there they have all these different sorts of minnow-like species, right? And the thing is that because they are artificially fed a lot with artificial carp food and stuff like that is thrown in all these lakes pretty well all through Europe constantly, these fish, then the minnows get bigger, and then the fish eating them get bigger, you see, so sort of thing like that. So it's unfair to sort of, like, in some of the stuff, like the northern pike, you get pike here just as long, but they're way, way less in weight because they just can't compete against, you know what I mean, the sort of girth that you're going to get of fish over there in these sorts of bodies of water, right? Lexa, we'll look at some more here. Germany's Lake Schlatensee, a giant trout accounts of monster browns called the sea forel, similar to like a ferox. Really, it's all the same, like it's a brown trout, but they tend to sort of eat the char and the different things in the lake instead of like what normal brown trout might eat, sort of crustaceans to all kinds of fly sort of larvae and different things like that. 5 million sorts of things that are smaller. These guys specifically mostly just feed off of other smaller sort of salmonoids and things like that, and that's why they get so big, right? One year was recorded 26 kilos. Look at how beautiful that place is. Absolutely stunning there. Now, here's one of my dream fish here. I've caught many, many species of whitefish, from even ones that are supposed to be extinct that now in Lake Superior, sort of thing like that. And I love this species, and there's quite a few still I have left to go that I've never been able to sort of, but I was able to chase them out in Bear Lake and all kinds of different ones from Lake Whitefish and sort of ones like this. And this is the number one sort of monster. This is the sheepish, other names in Alaska that they call it in canoe and these kinds of things, but it's a monster. And I mean, in old days, these dudes could at least reach 60 inches. So like a 5-foot whitefish. What a titanic monster. Absolutely. I mean, just extraordinarily fascinating fish. Absolutely the king of the north sort of stuff here, and a beautiful sort of a fish that it could be caught all through sort of like the range is extremely huge from Russia to Alaska, and then they've been even all kinds of river systems and stuff that flow in these places have them as well, and that wherever it's cleaner, sort of less polluted sort of stuff, and the further away from man, the more chance you got. But absolutely a spectacular sort of a fish, and but I mean, look like I said, how pretty that is. I mean, this is what we need to keep our waters locally and everywhere else clean like that, instead of this pollutants that we're constantly chucking in, you know. But absolutely a beautiful sort of a body of water, very, very pretty, and such a magnificent sort of fish. These sheepish here are just absolutely, I've always wanted to go up to fish far up in Alaska and hook into one of these dudes, man, because I mean, that's just, what a monster. I just love whitefish. I find them fascinatingly fun. And you'll see here, I'm releasing myself some around world record proportions and things like that. So of the typical lake whitefish and ones like that. But absolutely amazing sort of a creature, and just love them. Here, the Obra River, Poland, okay? This giant great snake to fish monster. He eats ducks, swans, was said to attack a lady swimmer. Some accounts say it attacks boats. Okay, another fish of Europe, the lake whitefish, are spread across many areas across Europe and North America. Here, this giant 14-pound, 6-ounce monster missed out the world record by a few ounces in Quebec. It was landed on 2-pound line. They can attain likely weights of near 30 pounds, and records of mid-20-pound fish caught commercially in past exist. So, and personally, I hooked one once that I believe was over 20 pounds, and after an extraordinarily long battle on 4-pound line, right, was bringing it up, the hole kept tearing a little bit bigger and bigger into its mouth, and even though I had a very small jig on, it sort of tore into it, and it just, when he turned his head when we were trying to net it, it flipped off. But I believe from, the girth of it and everything would match a typical 18 to 20 pound sort of carp, and I believe it was at least sort of in that range, sort of thing like that. But I've successfully landed them up to world record proportions sort of idea, right? so I mean, that's another fascinating species there, and there's like round whitefish and all kinds of different ones that they don't get. The main two big ones are, like lake whitefish and these in canoe and sort of European whitefish, that sort of thing. But there's smaller, different varieties out there that, and some endemic only to certain lakes, even in Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and stuff like that, and different ones where there's these sort of, just like endemic sort of only to a certain area and that sort of thing, right? So out in the East Coast and a few other places that I've yet to been able to sort of fish for them, but I'd love to and add them to my collection, right? But anyway, just, so, but here next, the Tyza River, Hungary, giant catfish attacking swimmers, and mentions in early centuries of ones being caught over 400 kilos. Can you imagine? So, yeah, and here, my buddy, the Esox lucius, the great northern pike, all through many areas of Europe, and accounts and records of old suggest at least 100-pound plus weights can be attained, and even mentions of ones over 200 of you. So you can see here, here's with what year it's like a later 20-pound fish. I forget what it was, 27 or 28 or something. But you can see here the difference is that even though this fish is similar sort of lengthwise, right? These creatures here in the sort of over Europe, these big pike, they get way fatter, right? And that sort of thing. And that's what one of the issues, that it's extremely rare that, unless the body water has some real fluke things about it, that these poor pike can get, like, even though, but they can get gigantic, and in old days, like I said, they used to be more of these giant monsters. In fact, a buddy of mine, he showed me an old photo of a 28.5-pound pike that was caught out of the Mississippi River. And if anybody knows this body water, I'm not talking about the Mississippi of the United States, this is Mississippi River of Ontario. A big pike in there is like even 5-6 pounds is decent, and a 10-pound one's a real monster. So here this moose was beating double plus of what almost is unheard of even at that point. It's rare that some are over the 10-pound mark. I'm thinking some up to about 14 pounds in there that I've seen over the years, but most of them were, though, like way smaller than this. And you can sometimes catch over 100 pike in a day's time using like zero spokes or all kinds of things like that. Extraordinarily fun fishing. If you get in the right section. Some areas of the river and the lake aren't fished that much, and sort of thing like that. And even though it's a polluted water and that sort of things, it has a decent pike fishing, but they're stunted, a lot of them, right? And this sort of thing like that. So can you imagine, like, even back in those days, that because the waters were clean, very few people on them, and sort of things like that, that even monsters in a place like that was able to develop, right? So that's the thing. But absolutely biggest pike I've ever seen caught in Mississippi by far. So my buddy there is grandfather there was the boss, man. The boss of Mississippi. Anybody can get a 28-pound pike out of there. He's my hero. Because that's a real monster. For, like, if you knew this body of water, that's shocking, right? But I see the photo. It's 100%. It's an old photo sitting in an old album, and it is definitely that size, like what he said. I know by releasing 10 zillion sort of muskies and these sorts of ranges and stuff like that are way bigger, and you'll see someone here that you know what I mean. That definitely would have been a fish of around this sort of size, right? And it was a fat, healthy fish too, and that wasn't skinny of any sort, and quite the moose. I wish I asked him for the photo before. I wanted to get it off him, and I kept forgetting at the time. But next time, if I'm ever over there, I'm gonna take a photo of it and then show it. And this is one of my beliefs: is that there used to be way bigger sorts of creatures around of fish and other things in the past because of lack of overfishing, damming, all these kinds of things that would sort of not, you now have better sort of possibility that more of the genetic monsters, each time when a fluke monster was born, she passes on their sort of stuff to the next one. And because nobody was taking them out of the waters, more of these eventually came along, and now you got a group in the lake that can sort of produce these sorts of bigger ones, and the gene stays, right? But once you start dragging them all out, and then all the rest of the fish are always usually smaller, Well, now that gene's gone, right? And this is sort of one of the things. So it's feasible that in ancient times it really is true that some of these pike might have reached like titanic proportions, right? Here, European warrior here. This is a wonderful pike, definitely one of my lists. Although accounts say it gets smaller typically, but there has been stories of some over 50 pounds that have been supposedly captured, but no evidence or proof I've seen yet of a photograph of one that size. But I have seen some in the mid 20-pound range and that sort of stuff. So for sure, I would suspect at least they could get 30 pounds, anyways, bare minimum, and probably way more. But they're mostly in the Amur Basin region, although they've been stocked in other waters, even in the USA, but seemingly was not successful. I think it was I can't remember, it was years ago. I remember that some, was it South Dakota or one of those guys? It was some weird state, anyways, that they not a common state, that decided to sort of have these transplanted, and sadly the waters was all polluted around there, and they didn't take very well. But I'd imagine a few were caught at first and stuff like that. So congratulations to some of the few people that ever got to catch them. Like, I'm one of the probably last people on earth that ever caught a blue walleye out of the Niagara River. And what was it, late 60s, I was down there as a little kid, and then in the early 70s, and both times I caught these little blue walleyes. Oh, they were ever cute. One was like about 12 inches long, 11 inches, and the other one was about 8 inches long. I only ever caught two of them, but absolutely spectacular sort of fish. And then all of a sudden they lowered the waters of the Niagara and somehow did something to them, and then they vanished. There still is though reports, though, so they may not be extinct, but they certainly went near extinction at that point, right? And that sort of thing. So when I was catching them, they were still fairly common, right? A sort of thing like that. And this happens in all kinds of bodies of water, and the same thing may be applying here to our lake monsters, right? Why they're vanishing in some lakes, and I cover all kinds of them in the book. Extinct lake monsters, there's tons of them where I cannot find any report whatsoever after a certain date, and I mean, I really tried, like every kind of thing, from people's diaries to begging people for stories, you name it. It doesn't matter. I really want to know the answer of these things, right? So I really put a lot of effort into trying to find these things, and I can't, some of them are just off the face of the earth. They were in early newspaper reports or some mention in a book or some weird thing, and never to be seen again, right? So it's quite interesting that this could be some of the problems is that our pollutants and the stuff like that, or overfishing and different things, may cause the decline of them quite quickly. Here, the Danube River monster, besides a story I tell in the book there where George had a few run-ins, and with the Danube River monster, and another one in a lake here in Ontario. And also his mermaid. George has had some pretty great luck when it comes to sort of lake river monsters, lake creatures. But besides all that, numerous tales of giant catfish to eels and pike, along with great snake beasts, have been told for centuries. The Danube goes through several countries. A Romanian fisherman was attacked and killed by a giant catfish while swimming in the Danube. The guy had decided to go way out in the middle of sort of the Danube in some big deep hole, and decided to go for a swim, and this giant catfish grabbed him, and they found the catfish apparently dead later with the guy, and his feet and part of his body was shoved down there. But I guess this particular one wasn't able to get him all through it down into him, and so he suffocated as well. So the both of them sort of died, right? Absolutely fascinating, but terrifying. Could you imagine, eh? Like, you're just going for a swim in the old river, and doo-doo, doo-doo. So it's not only sharks and stuff you need to be wary of. There's all kinds of stuff. Like I showed you that creature in the Thames River. I wouldn't swim in there if hell froze over. If hell froze over. Absolutely not. I mean, you got records of giant eels the size of King Kong, monster sharks eating people alive, plank dinosaur-like monsters. I mean, that place is a living smorgasbord of wackiness, right? Sort of thing. So definitely, I mean, don't really, when you're in big major river systems, don't take a chance. Seriously, I personally would. Because there is these things, eh? And I mean, in North America, we have giant gar that have attacked people and all kinds of stuff. There's other ones, giant catfish here too. They don't get as big, although there's stories out there as these whales or the Asian catfish or some of them, and we'll cover some more about that after. But that sort of thing, but certainly these accounts are sort of all over the place. So very interesting. And here are our beautiful Atlantic salmon. We have them here. They go Norway to Canada. All this sort of northern sorts of places here typically have them. And such a beautiful fish. And I mean, look at the girth on that. This one from Finland, just an absolute monster. That'd be a spectacular on a fly, man. Just spectacular. I'd be pretty excited with that. Sort of stuff like that. So not too bad. I've only ever gotten to hook a few Atlantic salmon in my life. Only got to do it once, and sort of thing like that. And they weren't monsters. Sort of they were decent for the size of body of water that they came out of, but they weren't like true titans or whatever. And I only had a day to do this, right? So, but I'd like to do some more Atlantic salmon fishing. I've fished a lot more for Chinook and the cohos and chums and these sorts of ones like that, but more times and those sort of ones. But for Atlantic salmon, getting out east and these sort of other countries and places like that have done extremely little. So definitely another one on the wish list of getting an actual trophy one. Now, here, Lake Monsters, the River Ebro in Spain, attacks on humans by giant catfish, reported people waiting in there, and all of a sudden, or the odd time of disappearance and stuff. So pretty creepy. Plus, monsters have been reeled in there, and a lot of people fish for them there all the time. Also, here are our common species we have here, the North American carp. I've been fishing for them since the 60s, way before a lot of these legends over in England, where these guys wouldn't even come remotely close to the amount that was captured over in these sort of regions. Back in the 60s, 70s, 80s even, a really slow day of carp fishing was like 40, 50 fish, right? And sort of thing like that. And I actually stopped keeping records in the later 70s at 25,000 carp. That's how, and I fished every sort of day for them and many species all at the same time. I'd fish for carp for so many hours, and after I catch like your arms are sore from them, then I'd start hunting muskies, pike, and walleyes, bass, and all kinds of other species, right? And but typically, though, again, the European carp, these ones here, like they have mirror carp, leather carp, and sort of common carp here and sort of stuff like that. Most of them are in Europe are way shorter. Canadian sort of North American fish can get longer, typically, and that, but they usually get much more fatter because of artificial feed, right? So look at this fatty pie down here, right? And you can see that from the artificial feed, although exceptions exist, like this monster here, 43.5 inch giant. It had like a 40-inch girth on it, man. Look at the girth on that thing, man. Absolutely astonishing. And I got that on 2-pound test line, right? Sort of thing. And this one just slightly over 4 feet here. An absolute titan, weight unknown. All right. But it was an absolute monster, but not as fat as this one, right? If it had been that fat, oh my God, that would have been even way worse. But this is just one of like numerally massive thousands of giant carp that have been reeling in since the 60s as a kid, right? And sort of stuff like that, using thousands of formulas and bait experimentations, and every day doing a different sorts of experimentations. I fish for them very different than a lot of European anglers. I use all those techniques, bolt rigs and all kinds of stuff and things like that, but we use those things before these terminologies ever existed. You had the Asians, when I was in the the 60s and stuff, they would quite often, they'd be fishing with worms and they wouldn't hook as many carp remotely as I would, but they would use like great big bolts and like a Wolf River rig type of an idea, or three-way rig sort of idea, where they'd have a sort of like a three-way swivel on it, or just a line, and then they would attach a leader out like about 2-3 feet or a foot, and then have a hook on it and thread a bunch of worms on there, and then on the other line going down, then you would just put like a sinker there, right? And they would attach these great big sort of bolts, because a lot of them they were Asian, and sort of they just used whatever was available to them, right? And what would happen is when the carp would sort of go and bolt like this, you'd see the rod bend down, and then it would actually help snare them, right? So the guy didn't even have to barely set the hook, sort of thing like that. So these kind of techniques, all this stuff was, so even though the English are known for sort of more making them sort of standard, and doing a lot of extra experimentations and these sorts of things, all these sorts of stuff that they talk about, like the method, is what we call frizzbie fishing here in the 70s. All the time as a little kid, what we would do is a lot of the kids I'd go fishing with and stuff like that, we would sort of have like I would have all kinds of about 4 or 5 different flavored baits, right? And sometimes these kids would actually want to eat them, or they'd get bored if it slowed down for 20 minutes. I mean, most kids didn't have the attention span of, I was a very different kid. I was super focused, always, you know what I mean, I'm willing to stand out there 16 hours, 18 hours, whatever it is, to keep hunting these fish. And I was crazy. I'd starve myself, not eat them, all kinds of stuff, because that's what I wanted to do. This is where I wanted to be, right? So I got to fish way more than any child in the universe, right? Sort of thing. And I experimented every day and studied from every important angler, all the way from angling times in England to countries all over the world, from Homer's Circle, it didn't matter, redfish, or you name it, whoever was around at the time, of any sorts of guys. I studied all any kind of thing they mentioned, and then I would experiment them not only on whatever species they mentioned, but dozens of others, from saltwater fish to whatever whatever the thing that I thought would probably work sort of on other sorts of species. I started doing this, and I mean, I brought in, like, for massive decades, giant smallmouths in tournaments all over the place, and a lot of them were captured off of huge spinner baits and things like that. Yet none of these sort of magazines or any of these people caught on to these things until way massive years later, and strictly was thought as a largemouth bass sort of bait. And I would bring in giant walleyes and northern pike and all kinds of stuff. So I'm a real spinnerbait freak. You'll see on my upcoming documentary there. You'll see I've been using these things since the later 60s there to shed twin Shannon, twin spins, and old rocker arms there, and beetle spins, ones like that. And even as a kid, I would modify them and put all kinds of shower curtains on them, bucktails, any kinds of stuff I could experiment with, right? So in my books, I cover a lot of these sorts of different things, of even how to catch these monsters and stuff like this, right? But this monster here was like landed on 2-pound line. It's way bigger than the so-called Canadian record. That's just one of thousands that have. I don't make, like I said, make my catches publicly known, and never have. And so, but I was thinking, since we were doing these, I might as well pop in a few of my own here. All right, sort of thing like that. So there's a lot more people way more famous than I am, that have never remotely caught some of the size of fish that I have of different species. I've released like massive tons of world record size suckers and numerous sorts of species, of monster carp that are way bigger than so-called Canadian records, and all kinds of stuff, muskies and other ones, right? So, but some species I've not been able to, where I've gotten them as big as they can humanly get in the kinds of waters that I fish, and they're extraordinary species, all of them, for these kinds of bodies of water. But they wouldn't be compared to like maybe in some other sort of country or stuff like that, right? Like the northern pike, two over 30 pounds and 28-pound one, and some other. But I never got to fish like really far northern remote lakes where 30, 40-pound plus sort of monsters exist, right? And sort of stuff. These were all caught in heavily fished waters where a big one's considered like 7 to 10 pounds. So these were extraordinary sort of fish here, just like this piece here out of this canal system here. All right, that's a very long fish and extremely fat. I mean, extremely. All right, sort of thing like that. So this dude was pigging out. Could you imagine if he had been living in sort of over here? He would have made this dude look like a mouse because he'd be even eating way more crap because this guy obviously was a very excellent feeder and an extraordinary sort of growing sort of fish, and had great genetics to it and healthy and everything, and it may still be alive. I haven't seen it in some time, but the point is that this monsters, and they can live a long time, these carp and sort of stuff like that. So even though a lot of people knock them, there is no better scrappers pretty well you can find than carp in a lot of ways. And I show in my films there me land some pretty monster ones like late 30-inch beasts and stuff like that. Just doing weekend little stints doing this documentary. This is heavily fished area, 10 zillion boats going over your head, with all kinds of debris and garbage and filthy mutant crap in it and all kinds of stuff, and most people think there's only sunfish in it or nothing. And you'll see that I pull out all kinds of monsters and sort of these different sort of in this documentary, just give you an idea of some of the ones. And that you'll see on a very light line, I land some of them in even the most heaviest, thickest of weeds and things like that. And so you'll see a lot of stuff that you wouldn't see in other sorts of ones. It's an interesting documentary. It's all just about our pollution worldwide, and that we need to start taking care of our bodies of water, right, and that sort of thing like that. But here next, Lake Orhid in sort of Macedonia there. This sort of lake is reported to be over 900 feet deep, 22 miles long, and tails of giant fish to a few plesiosaur kinds. Lake Prespa, also Macedonia, snake-like beasts and giant shadows in the lake. Lake Prespa, numerous anglers vanish with no chop or little, according to witnesses. So the guy's out in his boat rowing, and they find the boat later with nobody in it, right? And there was this one guy they interviewed that said a whole bunch had disappeared, right? so very interesting, sort of creepy, but absolutely beautiful lake. I'd love to fish it. I'm pretty sure these monsters are probably, we'll cover them soon, but I doubt it's probably sort of a Lochness monster. It's probably something that we do know what it is. But one account from Ohrid, a Yugoslavian family, they were rowing their boat near some, I think, castle. They were hard to, when I interviewed them, they were hard to sort of get like, but apparently there's some kind of either castle or some kind of big building, like, yeah, you know what I mean, like some kind of ancient relic place there of some sort, and they were fishing out somewhere in front of it, and they saw this sort of huge sort of black snake-like sort of thing. He had a small head, right, and his head rose about 5 feet above the surface, but he was very snake-like, and it seemed that he had large fins or flippers on the side, on the rest of his body underwater. They could see, like, it looked like as if the thing was a long thin neck with a small head, but that his body was wider, more in the center. And they noticed that there seemed to be two kinds of fins, like where they could see a shadow pointing up off of the thick body, so likely they were fins of some sort, right? And that was in the 1970s. Here, an actual photo of supposedly the Lake Prespa monster. You can see here on the left there its head, and it's very similar like that one I showed you from supposedly Lake Labinker, or the one from Lake Seneca, or ones like this, where there are these sort of weird sort of ones like that where they're similar, right? Sort of thing. So again, is this possible that there's some unknown variants, a few kinds of these things, that maybe one has a longer head than the next, or whatever, right? Like this kind of idea that comes from the ocean and our seas and gets in, and they visit these cold northern lakes to maybe anything from bait to eat in them for some reason, right? Sort of thing like that. But absolutely fascinating. Sort of another interesting account. Here, Lake Como monster, Italy. Look at how beautiful that is. This lake is interesting. Not only the sightings are fairly old, as some sources state at least several hundred years. The creature, unlike giant fish lakes mentioned, although they have them in there as well, is more a dinosaur-like creature in description. Has depths of over 1,300 feet, and 56 square miles, is more macho than Ness in size and depth, and description of the beast. He's pretty mean. He bumps into your boats more frequently than even the Nessie monster and that sort of thing, right? But here in 1946, two hunters had shot at the monster. Also, a species of dinosaur that was actually discovered there in the lake that sort of would look like that, but like they just found a small one. So their presumption is this is how big it is. But I mean, this is stupid. If you only ever found one fossil, how do you know you didn't find a baby one or whatever, right? Maybe they grow 100 times bigger. Like, you wouldn't know that, right? That's just assumptions, right? So, but it could be that this fossil that they found is actually the same monster here. So very interesting. This Lake Como monster, Italy, here we'll cover some of the sightings. A grayling have large. First, here I'll mention about the grayling. That's one of the species in the lake. They have a large distribution in different species, from Thymelus arcticus, meaning smell of thyme. So that's what the scientists, because apparently they smell like thyme. I've yet to been able to catch one of these things. Never been to a place where you could find them, sort of a thing like that. And so they're definitely one of the few sort of species I haven't been able to catch of most of the North American sort of stuff. But definitely this is what I've dreamed of since a kid, going to Great Bear Lake, which also has a lake monster in it. But there's many variants there. There's Montana grayling and European grayling and different ones, right? And sort of stuff like that. But most of them typically don't grow very big. And, a 4-pound one is a pretty monster macho, sort of 4 pound plus for any of the sorts of ones out there, and some of them get much smaller than that. So but they're beautiful sort of fish, and definitely sort of interesting sort of one, and great on a fly rod or that sort of thing, right? Here's some of the sightings. In 1936, an Italian couple rowing saw a large seal-like creature. It was brown. It was brownish fur covered and about 10 feet long, and it sprayed water at them. In 1954, a father and son saw a similar beast with fur-covered face, rounded snout, and webbed feet. In 1957, a crocodile-like creature about 6 foot long was spotted. A few other counts in the 50s and 60s, and seems to be dry a little bit, just the odd mention, but seemed to resurface in 2003 again, and that's about the last sighting that I can find. But this time it was a giant eel monster, right? So as we covered in the Irish ones, and that he was like 12 meters long. so absolutely, that sounds like a place to go to hunt giant eels. That's definitely what I would be interested in hooking, and and proving this, that actually such a thing exists 100% for sure, right? Sort of thing. But and so very interesting, a beautiful lake anyways, and has all kinds of other sorts of things in it, right? But here some more Lake Dellen and Lake Gretchen in Sweden. Okay, so Gretchen, so maybe it was named after some hot blonde named Gretchen, probably or something, right? But anyway, and this Lake Dellen has some reports going back at least hundreds of years, so they're a bit older, these ones. Lake Dellen, Sweden, for at least several hundred years, strange tales of a Nessie-like in description beast have popped up from time to time. Besides the monster, the lake has great brown trout fishing. It is actually two lakes connected, northern and southern, and there's depths of over 200 feet. So, reasonable sort of size lake monster, sort of a lake. And it's separated by a little channel where the creature can swim back and forth through it, very similar to some lakes you'll find here or stuff like that, where they'll have, it's really the same lake, but it's just a small channel that sort of divides apart portions of them, right? In 1800s, a large, long gray neck was witnessed going along the lake by three women rowing on a calm day. Was about 4 feet out of the water, head like a snake, but smooth skin. Several accounts in the 20s mentions a bunch of lumbermen and a raft witnessed the creature charge at them with great speed, then decided at the last moment to dive instead. There was some kids perch fishing in the 1930s, and this creature went up and smashed into their boat like you get in so many accounts, and sort of a thing like that, and scared the heck out of them, so they gave up perch fishing and hit for the hills. I probably wouldn't have. I know I'd be more interested in seeing the monster again, as well as long as I figured he couldn't eat me. But like I told you, if I seen that one in that Russian lake, that giant eel thing, that one creeps me out a little bit more. I'm not as scared of a giant fish because I've handled so many, but a giant eel of that size. And handling eels up to a little over 5 feet in length, and seeing a few even bigger than that sort of thing, and hooking into something that was hours of fight, that I believe was a giant Angola, that started really convincing me, yes, this theory is plausible, sort of thing. I could imagine what, one that size and him wrapping around your body and dragging you to the depths is pretty creepy. Mind you, the giant catfish we cover in here too are pretty creepy too. But for some reason, I'm actually more even scared of the worm-like eel monster than I am of even them. Sort of thing. But very interesting, and then there was another sighting in 1985. A couple witnessed out in their boat a large long neck with a head gray colored rise near their boat that was 6 to 7 feet above the water. So and they said it looked sort of like some kind of plesiosaurian sort of beast, of like dinosaurian like, right, sort of thing like that. So fascinating sort of place. Here, Lake Magoria, or Majoria, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Odd sightings of a plesiosaur type beast in Italy, depths of over 500 feet, and touches Switzerland as well, so it borders both countries. Giant fish to a few dinosaur-like tails pop up from time to time. Lake is said to have giant pike and sander, as well as mentioned has giant catfish. One account of an angler in the 70s being ripped in the lake after his line fully stripped in seconds. Descriptions varies. A few are more Nessie-like, right? So it's hard to get some of the reports on these things. There's not, they're very random, and they're not described that well, like a lot of them, sort of thing, right? Here, Lake Vadren, Sweden, second largest by surface area Swedish lake, has accounts of giant bird-eating monster. Description likely suggests great fish. Char and Atlantic salmon, along with fish ripping all your line out, suggests something might be in the lake. That's another sort of interesting, creepy dude here, sort of thing. I hear the boss of all sturgeon, the beluga sturgeon, is found in inland lakes and rivers from the Volga to Caspian. Commercial record shows this beast can get at least 30 feet long, but even stories of 40-foot plus ones exist, and sort of stuff like that, which I do not doubt. I actually don't. From my own experiences of how big lake sturgeon can get, which I mentioned a bunch in the book and stuff like that, in battling some real monsters, and witnesses seeing some the size of their pontoon boat that's 25 feet long. Yeah, it shows that occasionally even any of these species can get way bigger than typically a monster one would, right? Certain thing like that. Look at the size of that. I would kill to hook that thing. That would have been the greatest scrap on the planet, man. I would, I see these guys in the White River there, and I landed a few that were around 5 feet long. I only got to fish for them twice from shore, not in a boat, and in a small isolated areas, and I could only stay so many hours, and that was it. It would have been my choice. I wouldn't have left the place, right, until I landed one, 10, 15 feet long sort of thing, because I like hunting giants, right? But that's all I was stuck with, and I was lucky at least to catch one each sort of trip, right? And sort of thing like that. But I mean, when these guys, some of them, they'll battle one that's only like 10 feet long, and they've transferred it to 3 or 4 people because their arms get that sore. I wouldn't care if it ripped my arm sockets out. It could rip my head right off. There is no way I would hand my fishing rod to some other human being. I would prefer death over that. That would be embarrassing to me. That would never occur. I would prefer death, seriously. I would, because to me, that would be the most terrible thing on earth, that I would need to hand somebody my fishing rod. I mean, I couldn't handle that. So I know that sounds crazy, but I mean, seriously, when I see these stories and I think, holy cow, man, like, I wouldn't care if he was this big and if he towed me around for 40 hours. I've been towed around for over 3 hours by fish, and yes, my arms were sore and stuff like that, but I mean, I wasn't even in the billionth of a thought of starting to say, oh no, I'm going to have to hand my fishing rod to somebody. I mean, like, so that sort of thing like that. And when you're reeling it in, reel it in. Don't be handing it to somebody else. Yeah, even if you go to Swerve the next day, oh well, so be it. Go home and cry to mama. That sort of stuff, right? I landed like an over 14-foot nurse shark in Florida, and I mean, my arms were killing me from that. It was quite a long scrap, and I mean, and I landed that on only 50-pound test line, right? And I mean, this thing was monstrous. Like, the guy made us cut it at the boat. Like, I mean, it was completely tired out. It was actually just sitting and sort of almost relaxing just underneath the water a little bit. But by that point, it was actually because I just kept playing with it and never horsed it, and it towed us around all over the place and back and forth. It was quite the scrap, and he almost did take the line out several times completely, but I was able to sort of do it and handle this thing. And that's sort of the longest fish that I know of that I've ever sort of, where I perfectly landed the dude right at the thing, and he was, pretty huge. Right? Like, I don't know what its weight would have been. I mean, but it was absolutely astonishing sort of a fish, and I caught that off of a drift boat in Florida. Sort of thing, and obviously I won the contest that we had. There was like about 100 anglers on it. And boy, was I upset when this guy told me he had to cut the line. I wanted to so bad to, because I mean, how do you know what I mean, like, this was the most terrible thing to me in the universe, right? And then on another trip, a kid caught a great big one around similar size. It was well over 10 feet, this thing, and I was actually helping the kid, holding on to his waist, because this thing was sort of yanking him. He was quite smaller even than I was, and sort of thing like this on this other trip. And the same thing, they had to cut his line at the end, and it was a different sort of drift boat. And it was so, I mean, this kid was in tears. I mean, I can't blame him, because I was the same. So pretty upsetting. But the point is that there is monsters out there, and definitely sort of like that. And you don't need 10,000-pound test line and all kinds of stuff like that to be able to even land some super tight ones. And you certainly shouldn't have to be handling your rod to anybody. So anyway, so I wouldn't care. Like, one of my dreams, I've always wanted to go to Lake Iliamana and hunt for because I believe there are gigantic sturgeon that are in there, as well as I think there's also possibly a landlocked species of shark, or one that gets in through some system. Some of the reports is definitely shark-like. They don't sound sturgeon, and sort of stuff like that. And conveniently, all these baits, the baits you would use, would also attract sturgeon and sharks and different sorts of ones like that, catfish and these kinds of things. So this has always been one of my dreams, sort of ones, is to go to that one. And I would love to sort of hook into this dude and see if I could land one of these 20-foot plus monsters that are supposedly floating around in there, right? And I interviewed this witnesses there. They saw it. They rented a boat, and sort of, and I cover it in the book and things like that. And there's also been some monster, like 10-foot long sort of pike recorded. I like those stories. That sounds pretty good to me. I use gigantic baits of monster epic proportions, right? So I would have no problem sort of hunting these sort of things, because I have belief in these things will work, and I know what I'm doing, and I know where big fish locations are. So, and I know how to play monster fish on light and heavy line, right? Like, I go through seasons reeling in thousands of fish of many different species, and some seasons never lost one single fish. And so once they're hooked, they're coming in. That's the end, right? Because I do certain religious practices. The line's always tested to make sure that it's still in functional shape without any sort of nicks and scratches on it and things like that. I make sure that the rods that I'm using can handle the line that's dedicated to it, and these sorts of things like that. The hooks are laser sharp always. Always carry a file with me. If I could cement one in my skull, I would do so. That's how important they are to me, right? Yet almost all fishing stores, you never find a file, barely. Absolutely terrible. I mean, I wish that I wish I had my own sort of booths at every store across the thing of things that every angler on the planet should be using, no matter what. And this is definitely one of them. So even if you're not a big lake monster believer, but you like to fish, for God's sakes, go get yourself some files. Don't trust these laser sharp hooks come out of the package. So some of them are duds right from the beginning, or they're going to get dull very quick. And now you're going to lose this monster of a lifetime. Can you imagine if that guy hit, but now you got a crummy old dull hook, right? He's gone. Now you have only a story. These guys have the real thing. He's right there with them, right? So that's the difference, right? And sort of thing like that, right? But but anyways, just keep that sort of stuff in mind. And this Lake Raduda, besides a giant beluga that you can catch in there, it has record-sized carp of common and mirror, and stories of monster ones make this a fisherman's and lake monster hunter's dream. Although no nest exists, it still has monsters in the lake. It's about 450 hectares and depths of over 30 feet. So, and one of the few places you can actually fish for beluga and stuff like that, because they're sort of, it's a different sort of a thing, right? But in a lot of their range, they're sort of banned now, right? And that sort of thing like that. So here, the Kaluga, much rarer. He's really cool. I would kill to hook one of these dudes, man. But these Russian, I would love to personally meet Vladimir Putin and sit down and talk with him very serious for a few days about what the things I'm seeing, and to sort of hopefully waken the guy up a little bit, because he loves fishing too, and I'm sure he's aware of some of these things, but I'd like to sort of encourage him to sort of like really put enforcement on these places and start artificially producing these and putting them in other bodies of water that can handle this sort of stuff. So you always got some of these dudes around. And even though it's a long-term sort of thing and it takes some ages to get really huge, but in older records, they could at least get 20 feet. And there's stories of some even much bigger than that, and authenticated ones up to about 18.5 feet that I can find, right? Here's another monster beluga. Look at the size of this behemoth. So can you imagine this dude in a lake, right? That is a lake monster. So no wonder when people see some of these things, right? But look at how on a normal sturgeon, the mouth goes down like straight, sort of vertical down, sort of like this. But these ones, they're attacking predators. They've been noted to even attack all birds, and even there's been a few supposed cases on humans and stuff like that attacking at them. And they'll come up and sort of attack, and they hit their mouth is designed to sort of feed up in the different levels and layers. So they feed way more in those kinds of layers than other sturgeon do, although they do too. That's not a very recorded known thing, but I've seen this on flashers and sonars and watched with my own eyes this occurring. That lake sturgeon, I can't say all species do it, but I know lake and white sturgeon at least, and I've heard accounts of similar of Atlantic sturgeon doing this, where they'll come up and they'll smash into a group, a school of, let's say, Cisco or whatever it is in the lake, and they injure them, and then they'll sort of start diving around looking for the ones that they nailed off, right? And I actually watched this with my own eyes. So even though a lot of lake monster guys for cryptid books claim that lake sturgeon rarely go on the surface, so they can't be the answer, that's not true. I've witnessed in many lakes lake sturgeon sightings many times where I knew exactly what it was. There was a lake sturgeon, I could see them, and they do come up on the surface, and they will sort of even hit sort of weird things. That there's stories of them attacking even ducks and different weird stuff. So they will under certain circumstances. It all depends on the body of water. Like on Blue Sea Lake, I never even though fishing on there and ran in a pike so huge that it was absolutely extraordinary monster, and I mean a monster. All right, about the biggest I've ever seen, except in this reservoir that I went into. Another one that was similar size and hailed a giant walleye I was reeling in. And yeah, completely cut me off. He inhaled everything. He actually grabbed the whole walleye, and instead of grabbing it sideways or anything, just inhaled it. I mean, it was the most craziest thing, and these idiots told us, and I never listened before that, barely, and I don't know why I listened that time, but they said, oh, no, there's no, it's not a pike fishing body of water. You're going to catch like over 100 walleye a day, which they were totally telling the truth. I caught 183 walleye the first day. The second day, I think it was like about 150 some, and it kept shrinking every day by about 5 or 10, you know, sort of thing. But while we were there, but they didn't tell us. They said, and this was what I wanted to do, was hunt monster pike much more than walleyes, but this was the only thing available at that moment. And when you'd be bringing in these walleyes, sometimes these giant pike would come out of nowhere, and I mean, some were titanic, like monsters. Right? The biggest pike I've ever seen in any numbers and stuff like that. So that was my only sort of a real sort of a far northern trip and a fly-in trip where I could have, if I had sort of proper sort of stuff with me and things like that, instead of a 4 and 2 pound line and small little jigs and these kinds of things. We got so bored that to see what they wouldn't bite on, so we started using watches. Somebody cut a bra in half and dropped it down in the water and actually caught like an over 7 pound pickerel with it, attaching a bell sinker to it. Absolutely hilarious, just jigging it up and down. One of the guys that was with me in the boat, and as real fun stuff. When we started getting so bored of catching them, I mean, every cast constantly, I mean, it was just mind-boggling stuff. Great fishing, certainly, to say the least. But that was the thing. So when people tell you, like when you're going to these bodies of water, don't trust them. And so if they say there's no bass or trout or other things, bring a little bit of these kinds of, that's more going to work for them typically along with you, because you don't know what you're going to run across, right? And most lures, I've known this since a little tiny kid, will work on all families of fish, from saltwater to freshwater. So even though they call it a bass lure, you can also catch a tarpon with it, or all kinds of stuff, right? So this is a misconception by anglers that is sort of not correct. Like, I mean, I've even caught monster smallmouth bass a few times reeling in dough balls. Right? And stuff like that. So, I mean, a lot of sort of occurrences. So you always be prepared, and sort of, I shouldn't have listened to them. I was a foolish mistake on my part, sort of thing like that. And it cost me, because, I mean, I could have reeled in some real monsters. I had all the kinds of equipment for it, giant baits, homemade baits that I make, like, are over 20 inches long, and all kinds of stuff like that. And, you know, I would have been prepared, right? sort of thing like this. But anyways, this killer Kaluga sturgeon here is one pretty macho dude there, and apparently they can really jump out of the water and give a spectacular fight of epic proportions. But you can certainly see giants certainly do exist here. Like I mean, absolutely extraordinary the size of what they can actually get. I hear Oder River, Poland, giant catfish killed and inside remains of a missing German soldier. The fish was said to be over 12 feet long. Story not verified. It's been passed around in different sort of news ones from, but some of the sources are a bit out there. But I mean, it's fully plausible in the sense that they can get that big, and it's fully plausible that, and there has been attacks and even children found inside of them, and an adult proven one, a few of them, where actually it was a giant catfish that killed them. Sort of thing like that. It shows that it's very likely possible that that was a true story. The Dare Standard in 2009 mentions a girl being attacked by a gigantic catfish in a lake in Hungary. I don't know the name of it. They didn't mention that sort of thing, but it was just another interesting one. And you can see they get quite huge. Like here's not even a monster one, but look at this diver compared to him. Can you imagine that thing coming up to you now and doo-doo? All right. So beautiful sort of river. Anyways, absolutely spectacular. I hear aboard this giant monster Russian one here, a giant Wells catfish. They have a large distribution through Europe and surely responsible for many lake and river monster stories. Russian records show fish over 15 feet, although reports of double that size exist, and likely at least grows longer than the so-called largest Mekong catfish. Records of some caught over 400 kilos in early centuries exceed weights of known of the Mekong catfish. So it's, yeah, you know, there's arguments. I state personally that the Wells catfish is bigger. That's what I personally believe. And they'll live longer too in these sort of colder sort of regions and stuff like that, and they have all that sort of stuff. But Mekong is definitely another giant, and apparently in old days there might have been some that reached near the 20-foot length. So it's a battle, sort of, you could argue both sides of the fence. I'm fair, but in my personal belief, I believe that Wells catfish under the right condition can get slightly bigger than, you know what I mean, what they're achieving. The catfish now that are being caught in the Mekong and stuff like that, or these different ones in those regions. And they've been transported to sort of lakes to keep them going, like to make sure they don't go extinct. And some of them are getting pretty huge in some of those lakes as well. And here's some more here. These monsters, unlike most catfish, feed on surface more often than other species and have been known to attack pets to swimmers, and even giant turtles such as this beast from Sweden tried to do it and choked on it. So this poor dude, he inhaled this huge turtle, and sort of it got stuck on his gill, I guess, somewhere where, you can see part of his foot coming out there. Somehow it got trapped in his ear, sort of. Like if that hadn't happened, he probably would have been able to do it. But because the back sort of claws there went through his gills, it then suffocated him, right? So here's a lady I'd go fishing with anytime. Any woman that is willing to be even holding one of these monster goons and loves fishing for them. That's a lady that I'd be definitely hanging out with anytime. That's fantastic. I can sit there 24 hours a day, and at least and women can be quite lucky when it comes to the old big fish tales. You'll hear these stories of legendary anglers, and some lady comes on there and she doesn't know, makes her first cast and she thinks she's snagged and reels in a 60-inch muskie or stuff, which they haven't still yet to do. Serious stuff. So you get these stories constantly. So a lot of men don't like bringing the women fishing with them because of those reasons. but I don't fear such things. I couldn't. It's all entertainment to me, and I like teaching. Sort of, especially I'd bring out young ladies ice fishing and actually train them on the fly, and they won contests through my methodologies, right, and stuff like that. So certainly there's some fantastic lady anglers out there as well. But here, these species have been known to even crawl on shore and try and grab swans to pigeons. One early account in Bratislava, a giant cat was captured and a child was found in it. Main River in Germany, a 2 meter catfish died trying to eat a soccer ball. So you can see it here. He actually tried to inhale this sort of that thing here. Lake Cassine in France, a giant monster fish that was battled for over 14 hours. That might be a misprint. It might have been 18 hours. I can't remember. It was somewhere in this sort of range. Anyways, it was over a dozen hours that this dude fought this thing. And it actually just pulled them up and down Lake Cassine all over the place and a sort of thing like this and broke off, but they never saw it. Well, so likely that's what it was probably one of those, or somehow something else got in there. But there's the Lake Cassine is artificial and it comes from other water systems here. So yeah, that probably the monster got in through that methodology, right? So absolutely fascinating, but just another interesting sort of tale here. Many so-called water monster lakes are giant fish, especially in Europe. The Welsh catfish tales are not that exaggerated. Here on the right, this young fellow broke the British record over 7 feet. So you can see it there. There was one caught a little bit bigger than that, but apparently it died or stuff like that. But I mean, even in sort of small British waters in a little pond, sort of idea, these monsters can get pretty huge. Here, early German accounts of newspapers showing here, they were showing that so many people, boaters and everybody else, and people were disappearing and being attacked and their pets and everything else by these giant killer catfish. So the stories aren't really that exaggerated because there's actually evidence enough for it, and plenty of mention in ancient sort of older accounts of ones of titanic proportions that were even way bigger than the ones being reeled in nowadays, right? Eels, many species of eels exist and are for sure responsible for many river and lake monster sightings. You got conger, moray, shortfin, longfin eels, all have been reported to get much longer than accepted. They can be caught in many bodies of water from New Zealand to Canada and all through Europe. Many older records show eels being found dead over 20 feet long. The R River in Switzerland, giant 10 to 30-foot eels were common reported in the river until damming. Notice the similarity, like I had mentioned in some of the other ones over in Scotland and stuff like that. Once they made the dam, then the eel monster sightings seemed to go away, right? But if you are going to look, apparently the gorge is the best place to go hunted. Now, I personally reeled in eels a few over 5 feet long. Sadly, rarely we ever took photographs of all kinds of stuff, but I just found a few to give you amusement here, or sort of idea. And quite often at night we'd catch like 10 to 20 of these dudes, and I've caught them in all kinds of diverse bodies of water, from the Rideau Canal to the Rideau River, Ottawa River, to St. Lawrence, and all kinds of different things in different lakes. I caught one in a pit, a pond that is massively sort of in water, and it's a tiny little pit, a pond that was created when these guys dug down. They hit some underground sort of river system, and it flooded it up, and this eel actually got in there along with carp, muskies, pike, largemouth, smallmouth, and some bizarre sculpin species that I noted for about 5 minutes. I couldn't get close enough to it, and I was scared to sort of scare him off. I wanted to get as good of a view of him as I could, and he was very peculiar. He wasn't a mollusca or any of the sort of typical ones that you would find here in these regions, and I've looked at different ones all across sort of Europe and North America, and none sort of still match with this sort of weird sculpin. So this pit might actually have some unknown species of sculpin in it, but these eels are amazing. They can crawl up through grass into all kinds of stuff and meander into all kinds of lakes and things like that, and certainly are responsible for some of these sorts of sightings here. Like the Birmingham Shipping Canal, a 20-foot giant eel witness was found there. Another similar size eel was caught. What happened, body unknown, by workers in a factory near Doris cooling system. Mentions in several locks on the Thames River of giant eels 20 to 30 foot long in the past that was found dead in these different sort of canals. Another one is in the Caledonia Canal that I didn't mention here, but I mean, it's sort of just another one I was thinking of, and a bunch of other ones here. Besides, film showed you Ness in 2004. A Canadian tourist thought a giant thought it was a giant eel that was dead, and he said it was at least over 20 feet long, and then all of a sudden it wiggled, so the guy sort of panicked and shot back up the shoreline, right? And sort of thing like that. So they're still being seen and all over the place, right? And I showed you some of the films, that one from Serbia and different ones, and I'll cover a bunch of the book and things like that. I'm not covering it here and that sort of thing, but giant eels, for sure, extremely interesting. In the Ottawa River, I saw one dead that we couldn't get at because we were anchored at night, but it drifted past us, and it was way longer than the 60-inch measuring board that I had on the side of the boat. So I'd given another foot and a half on it. So I personally saw one dead eel that might have been, 7.5 feet in length. And I've collected stories of people from some 20, 30 feet long and stuff like that, including one in the Rideau Canal that's never been published, of a giant, sort of a transparent giant one that was witnessed, that was about 9 feet long, that I covered in the book, and different ones like that. So there's definitely all kinds of evidence of this. Sadly, no photographs yet to this date, really, except finally now proven a giant eel of over 20 feet exists, but it's a saltwater. But I mean, still, the point is that even that was considered mythological all this time until now. And so then the same thing is, how do you know how much bigger they really can get, right? So maybe these tales are true. It's just back in older days, right? I mean, there was more of these things, and the waters were cleaner, more fish, more things for them to eat, more get bigger, and less commercial fishing and all that sort of stuff. That's, the reasons that and the lack of photograph. Like, I mean, even me in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the amounts of some of the most astonishing fish you could ever possibly imagine that I'd release constantly on a daily basis, that are record-sized sorts of fish of many sorts of species and things like that. And very rarely did we ever sort of take photographs and stuff like that, and because they were expensive, and it was just another big fish, right? Sort of thing like that. For most anglers, once a guy, oh my goodness, and the kid catches, a 40-inch muskies, that's his big hero thing of his lifetime, right? But I mean, somebody that fish around the clock and they're used to fishing in waters with monstrous sorts of fish in them, well, then these things don't get as exciting, right? It's just another one to add to your list. It's still exciting, but I mean, certainly not the same as, like, for me, if I went out and caught 100-pound muskie. Now that would excite me, right? But you'd see a smile from it would blow up my head, man. I'd be so excited, right? And that sort of thing. But I mean, I've reeled in many, many giant ones over 60 inches, and tons in the 50-inch range, and thousands below that in the later 40s to 30-some-inch range, sort of things like that, right? So this is the thing, is that in those days, a lot of people didn't take photographs, even back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Even still wasn't until the rise of the digital camera. Depending on the area and how rich the person was and all kinds of stuff, would only dictate whether or not they would have sort of photos or not, or that sort of thing, right? So, but very interesting, anyways, and it's just another sort of things here where there certainly is a lot of sort of gigantic sort of creatures that are visiting some of our waters here. Like here, Bass and Thwaite, Lake England, I forgot to mention that in the other one there, but this strange humanoid mermaid-like creature was witnessed in there, 4 miles long with depths of 70 feet. I think it's likely seals or something like that, or possibly a mutant mermaid that got off course, or sort of stuff like that. But apparently it has some decent fishing in it for salmon and pike and perch and that sort of thing like that. But anyways, just another sort of interesting ones out there that you can see as very interesting. and it makes you wonder what's really out there, right? And all the kinds of stuff like that. Now, I could have covered dozens more of these kinds of things here, but there's so many of them, and I just wanted to give you a basic idea. And next time we'll cover some from some other sort of places and things like that. Next show, more giants from Europe, South America, and other countries. So as you can see here, here's a legendary giant monster from the past, and you can see myself have reeled in such giants, and here's just one of the numerous ones that I've never made my catches publicly known. But there you go. So you can certainly see that there is some monsters around, and certainly that you know what I mean, sort of thing. And amazingly, I don't even belong to any sort of muskie clubs. I won muskie tournaments, but nobody, almost zero, knows of my sort of existence and sort of thing like that in the world of that sort of world, because I've always kept these things very private and just don't care about such things. But because this is part of the show and stuff like that, I just wanted to give you an idea, and my upcoming book and stuff like that. I cover a lot of giant fish sort of things and that sort of thing. So just to give you an idea that yes, they truly do exist. All right. Look at the size of this fat moose pike here in the center. I think the guy's name was Lothar or something. I forget about it, but it was like, was a 55-pound giant. I mean, absolutely astonishing fat fish. But what a moose! All right. So even though the Hartmans, the Lotmans, and a lot of people are sort of famous, that have none of these people caught as many giant muskies as I have. And so even though there's a lot of more legends in the business and stuff like that, I guided for them for decades, and have had people terrified coming back with stories telling them about fish the size of me and stuff like that, and numerous ones over the years. And to me, it was no big of a deal. Back in the old days, quite often I caught like 15 to sometimes over 25 muskies in a day, and 5 times over 30 muskies in a day, including one time 38 muskies on the Rita River in one day. So most astonishing sort of a muskie achievement you could probably humanly near get out of there. So you know, sort of thing like that. So just some of the sort of accolades, right, and that sort of thing. So but all kinds of other ones we'll cover here. Some more of the regular Lochness type, but also other monster fish. They're being seen in bodies of waters worldwide, and I'll keep doing these different ones like that. And I'll mention some of the giant fish species that can be seen in these kinds of bodies of water as well. So please, if you have any giant fish tails, I love them. And I mean, as you can see, they're not all giant fish tails. A lot of them are real, and this sort of thing like that. And also, you know, or lake monster, Bigfoot, the Mothman, you saw some cave creature. I don't care what it is. I'm totally fascinated by these sorts of things and love to add it to my database. And I find this extremely important because I care about these sort of fish, animal creatures, anything. It doesn't matter. You can be the biggest skeptic in the world. Like, I mean, like I showed you in the canal over there previous, one of the big mooses there, that sort of thing like that. People could go by there a trillion times and never would believe such giant monster fish exist in there, right? And then this sort of thing like that. And scientists, like, there was a guy that was trapping in there for years and he didn't even catch them that big in there. And this guy was using nets and he claimed they all lived in a deep hole in the middle of the lake. And I mean, complete gobbledygook. I catch them all through the system in very shallow water in different areas, even in the hottest of days in the middle of summer. Right? So, I mean, there's a lot of misinformation that scientists have on this. That's just because that's where he happened to catch them. So he didn't catch them in another spot, so he presumes that they're never there. I mean, that's, you know, the fish might have moved and whatever, right? Like, they travel. Some muskies stay, they're known to hang out. Like, there used to be this giant story of the Dow's Lake monster muskie, of one that was about 50-some pounds on it, that had all kinds of hooks in his mouth from different characters that had hooked it over the years, and it would hang around this boat dock and come out and sort of scare, and apparently even attacked somebody's chihuahua once that they saw the chihuahua sort of was swimming and something started coming towards it, and the lady sort of jumped right in the water and sort of grabbed at the pooch before the thing got to it. But I sort of thing, and this was around this filthy old. They used to have this old. A Dow's Lake sort of a boathouse, but now there's still one there, but it's all changed around now, and it's not the same as what it was way back in the day. But even that sort of thing like that. So these sort of stories are consistently have been around for ages in all kinds of bodies of water, and there definitely is some sort of truth to them, and a lot of them, and that sort of thing like that. And it just but in that case, that fish was one that seemingly was seen at many times a day, even in the evening there. So the fish was a homebody. This guy had a very small range of hunting, and he was comfortable there. She was a big old lady, be a female, but she was comfortable in this sort of area and then was hunting in there, and sort of that's that. But then other muskies travel constantly all the time, and travel many miles throughout a day. They have feeding routes and they'll do different things, right? So all depends on the body of water, and even in the same body of water you can have ones that'll do that, and then ones that will travel miles. Like in the Ottawa River, the same thing. There was a giant muskie that used to hang around this boathouse, and I caught him probably about 7-8 times. He was like late 50 inches on him, all off the same boathouse every time at different times a day, and never saw the fish any other sort of location and stuff like that. And that sort of thing. So it just goes to show that, like, there's a lot of fish species behavior that is not really known to the sort of scientific community properly, and they're just sort of starting to learn this stuff. And there's individual preferences of fish, just like humans. So, like, I mean, you got, I don't know, like somebody like Sir Edmund Hillary that likes climbing mountains and traversing in the farthest corners of the earth to get his action. And but then you got Homeboy Joe, and the most he's ever done is go get up to get to the bathroom or to get another bowl of cereal, and then he sits back down playing his video game 24 hours a day. You have these sorts, right? So it's the same thing with fish and any other creatures. I imagine Sasquatch is the same. Some might move, some don't, right? This sort of thing. So this is common, and you know, sort of like that, and it's interesting. It's just another interesting phenomena. But we'll certainly cover some more monsters on some next shows there. So stay tuned for that, and hopefully you enjoyed this presentation. And take care, and bye for now.